I was having coffee with a friend one day, and we are at this little coffee shop, and she's telling me this story about this day at work that made her change her life. And she said, he told me to leave that at the door and not to bring that into the office. This is a C-suite executive whose child was going to the hospital. This depth of major difficulty in this woman's life. And somebody said, you can't bring that to work. And I was shocked. I was totally shocked because this was a place that said, we really care about our people and we want to make sure that you're cared for and that we are for you in everything that you do, except when something happens that impacts, our bottom line, because I can't figure out how to do that. And it was terrible. And it caused her to leave that organization. And she ended up moving to another place and designing the perfect job for herself, actually, and really being able to impact the culture because that's what fit her values. And I was thinking about that conversation when my friend Kristin Thompson Poelker was like, I think I'd like to talk about this on your podcast. And I was like, yes, this will be so good. And so Kristin was not the friend in that conversation, but she is a woman in the financial industry, and she has an amazing story to share about being a change agent and what does it take to be a change agent that's true to you and true to your values, but also is part of being a great leader in an organization that wants to thrive. So I am so excited to introduce you to Kristin, and here she is.
Hello.
Hello. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited. So give the people a little bit of who you are and how you got here.
Yes. Again, thanks so much. So, I'm a financial advisor in St. Louis, and I think that my story relates to that change from the jump because I actually studied mathematics. I, yeah, I bring that up because studying mathematics, for anyone listening on the pod or anything, I'm an African American woman. So I always used to people not looking like me.
Mhm.
So when I was studying mathematics, trying to figure out in college, what do I want to do with that? Kind of stumbled into financial advising might be a way to combine my interest with the ability to help people. The fact that I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me doing this, that didn't even know about it before, didn't deter me because of what I was studying, I was already used to that.
Yeah.
So it really was just a matter of can I be successful? And the firm I chose, I work with Renaissance Financial. I knew would have the tools to help me thrive and survive. And every day on the job, it was matching that expectation. I was feeling fulfilled and challenged, and that led to where I am now.
Yeah. And so tell me, how long again have you been at Renaissance?
12 years now,
Yeah.
a little over 12 years. Yeah.
Yeah, a long time. I think I bring that up because I think that will be important as we talk about an organization living by their values, because
Yes.
this is the firm that you chose
Yes.
and you have been there 12 years.
Yes.
That is, in my experience, unusual. In your
Yes.
experience, is that unusual?
Oh, yeah. The
Yeah.
amount of peers I have who have had several different jobs.
Uh-huh.
I mean, even when my husband was changing jobs at one point, I was said, I can't really help you with the interview. I haven't done an interview and updated my resume in a work sense in, like 13 years.
Yeah.
So I was not very helpful.
I'm sure you were helpful in all kinds of other ways.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, if you're listening live in the comments, is that idea of being someplace for so long exciting to you? Or is that like, oh, I don't even know what to do with that? That's kind of an
Yeah.
interesting perspective in the workforce.
Yeah.
So what we really wanted to talk about today is this idea of being a change agent. I know I have been in a toxic work culture before.
Mhm.
I have been in amazing work cultures before. And I work now, as a speaker and a consultant to help people create positive culture
Yeah.
with the complex people that come our way. And sometimes we get stuck in the system, or we get stuck because people say, that's how it's always been.
Yeah.
So how have you approached the idea of creating change and being a change agent?
Yes. And I think it's funny. You're like, I've worked in this atmosphere, and even though I've been here 12 years, it's been all of those as well.
Yes.
Yes, yes. But with that said, when I first came into the business at 22, 23, you're just soaking it all in. You're a sponge, and I certainly was told to be a chameleon, and I was
Mm.
told to adjust to what other people were doing, and I was trying to be like the guys. I'm putting air quotes around that because I don't want it to be that I ever denied who I was as a woman, in the
Mhm.
sense of I was never trying to do this and, talking about football when I don't know anything about football. I was never doing that. But
Uh-huh.
at the same time, I wasn't necessarily embracing my femininity either.
Mhm.
Um, and I found that not bringing my whole self was hurting my success in the business.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so a female colleague took me under her wing and really kind of said, you have the ability to carve your own way. That's one reason why you chose this firm, because you can do that. And by doing that, I really leaned into, first, it was that I enjoy working with women. So that was me engaging and leaning into my femininity. I'm going to wear dresses to work. I mean, someone even told me once to cut my hair because I wouldn't have been taken as seriously because of age, but just lean
Mhm.
into, this is who I am, and showing up. And by leaning into that and always finding success doing that, it became that Gandhi quote. I think it's Gandhi: "Be the change you want to see in the
Mm.
world."
Yeah.
And as I started to have struggles in my personal life, I kept them away, because that's what you do. I feel like that's the traditional corporate environment. Like
Mhm.
you said with your story and the woman in coffee, leave that at home. But then I wasn't being my whole self, and I couldn't then be the best to my clients. So it was risky and scary, but I started to share my challenges. And what I found was it opened up so many more conversations and actually deepened my relationships, and earned me a lot more respect that I was having all this going on at home and still showing up.
Yeah. That's so, I mean, there's so many pieces in there I wanna pull out. Like, it's really so good, and to hone in on the idea that it was risky and it was scary, but it
Yeah.
was also to bring your whole self and really share some challenges, but the result was that it actually made you better at your work.
Yeah.
And, so, if you're listening, I just want you to think for a second, is it scary at your place to be the woman among the dudes? Is it scary to be the dude amongst the women in
Yeah.
that switch? Is it
Right.
scary to be the only Black woman? Is it scary to be whichever place that you're in,
Right.
you feel like you can bring your whole self? Like,
Right.
I'm asking you, the people, what do you think?
Yeah.
And so, because I think your story is so powerful when we connect to that, like, oh, this is where that's scary for me.
Hmm.
And the thing that you were starting to struggle with, I think, is a particularly taboo subject
Yeah.
often in the workplace. So I'm just going to let you share what started in your life as you've been there 12 years, started in your 20s, you're in your 30s, you're getting married.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
happening?
Right. So to give some background, so started in my 20s, and I think the things that made me great at this job were the things that were holding me back in my personal life, in the sense of I personally had nothing but time in my 20s.
Okay.
I was single. I soon lived by myself, so I could give everything to my job.
Mm.
And then I got married, but it did make dating hard for a minute, to be a woman who was so committed to work. But I found a wonderful partner who appreciated and respect that in me. And then naturally, we wanted to grow a family, and we struggled with infertility. And it's taboo because I think there's a stigma about a woman not being able to do the one thing kind of your body's supposed to do. I think it's a stigma to be a woman sharing, I'm thinking about doing something that takes out a lot of women of the workforce, and
Yeah.
I'm putting out there that I'm doing it. Um, and then honestly, it was a struggle, just because, and this relates to the 8, like I don't fail.
Yeah, so as an Enneagram 8, so the Enneagram is a personality framework,
Yeah,
and the types
yeah,
are labeled by numbers if you're new, and the Enneagram 8 is like, we're doing this thing,
yeah,
I'm not gonna be vulnerable about it, and we're gonna win. And
yeah,
so, gosh, all of that means I don't fail? That's really hard.
yeah. It was the first time in my life that I had done everything you're supposed to, quote unquote, supposed to, as in taking care of myself, learning the hormones tracking and all those things you're supposed to, and nothing was working. And I'm saying nothing was working as far as our infertility. It was not getting there. And that was very hard to accept. It was hard to deal with. It was hard to process. Because how do you ask for help with this one thing, and how do you emotionally deal with that? But at some point,
and continue to work
continue to work. And I mentioned the continue to work thing because at some point, and I might, this might be starting to get out of order, but I think it's important. At some point, I wanted to talk about it because the more I had to give grace to myself, the more I learned to try and be helpful to clients and colleagues and try and give grace to them. And with infertility, what I was finding was that I kind of lost my train of thought here. So I'm going to stop there on that.
I think that's really good, because what you've discovered is, okay, I have done this really hard thing that is antithetical to what I've always been.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to be vulnerable. I'm not going to share.
Yeah.
And this is deeply personal. It's weird because you're like, I'm tracking hormones and things that we just don't talk about in general. And especially not at work when we're talking about finances, that can seem so weird. And yet you made that leap because you started giving compassion to yourself.
Yeah.
Then the extension of that is that made you compassionate to people that you work with.
Yes.
Who doesn't want to work with people that are more compassionate?
Right.
Like nobody wants to have the opposite of that.
Right.
So how did you then start to share that, and you saw these results of compassion being spread? How did you then continue when it still didn't work again?
Yeah. Right.
So, I mean, I'm kind of giving away a little story.
Yeah. So to give anyone who doesn't know my story background, so we were actually trying to conceive for 3 years, for 3 full years. The first year, struggled and pushed in silence. It was end of the pandemic going into the new year. And so where I'm going with that, it was easier to hide. But as we all started to emerge a little bit more, I didn't feel like I was being as present. So I first started by sharing only with colleagues, not sharing with clients, but sharing with colleagues, because frankly, what I think is underrated and why this has become such a passion of mine, because I can't imagine if I had a job where I had limited PTO, but frankly, because I needed to go to appointments. I needed to go to the doctor's office. I needed to be available. I needed to be able to give myself shots. I mean, at the deepest part, at most, because my husband would help me give me shots. We were doing maybe 4 different shots a day at most. That have to happen at a certain time. And then you go to an appointment every other day to track all that. So first I started internally just to say, hey, no, I can't do a meeting at this time. And here's what's going on, because I think this, so that's how it started. And then slowly it morphed to not sharing with clients every detail, because there is that level of respect. You're coming in for me. I mean, imagine going to your doctor starts blabbing about their own problems. Right. But again, started to share that passion, because I would have clients who were adopting, who were trying to save money for surrogacy, and to be able to say, hey, I did this too. Here's the actual cost that you might endure, and here's the space you need to save for yourself. So it felt really good to be able to be there. And the last thing I'll say about this, I remember my train of thought. It also felt important to me to share, because I personally believe that women, when we're going through this, we can be so hard on ourselves, and we see the image of the woman who just gave birth and immediately went back to work, or was doing emails from the bed. So I also wanted to share to relieve other women of that pressure.
Yeah.
Work ended up being my sanctuary, because I felt like it was the one thing I could do right. But it almost felt like, and the more I'm being transparent, I'm doing this for my mental health, the more I wanted to give other women the freedom. So if that's not going to do it for your mental health, you need to give yourself that space, because you're not doing anyone a good service. You're not going to be a good colleague. You're not going to be a good employee if you're not doing that.
Yeah, that's so good, because we have, just even imagine not this super weighty emotional thing, the idea of a family and all of that, just any other medical condition,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like where you have to have medication or you have to
Right.
have regular appointments, or even mental health struggles, which also have some taboo in the
Right.
workplace, you know.
Right.
And I'm really curious, as you like want to give other people freedom and you wanted to share, what was some of your filtering? Because I can hear the naysayers are like, well, I mean, I don't want to share everything. How do you know? And they're like,
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. How
Yeah.
did you decide? Here's what's really important for somebody to know, and here's what I'm gonna keep, not secret, but private.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm a big believer in once you do put anything out there, you got to be okay with it being out there. So let's start there. It's just
Wise words.
yeah,
Wise words.
right. And then the other thing that I started to believe is these things are only a big deal if it's sorry, not a big deal because this is a major deal. They're awkward if you make it awkward. And so as simple as it is, if I were to say, oh, and before our next meeting, I really got something important to tell you, that adds a lot more weight
Uh-huh.
to than me saying, I can see you in 2 weeks. I'm going to tell you though, I might have to push that meeting back if I'm coming late from a doctor's appointment. I'm going through IVF. Just
Yeah.
it's almost by normalizing how I talked about it, it gave the topic room to be normal.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do with that what you will. And some people engaged in it more, and some people didn't. And that wasn't, I think sometimes we put the onus on ourselves to decide how other people are going to feel, and that
Yeah.
was not, yeah.
Yeah.
So that this is where it is. If you want to talk about it more, I'm comfortable talking about it more because I clearly just brought it up. If you
Yeah.
don't want to talk about it, you don't want to talk about it. But I have this thing, and you know the right people. There are still probably some people that I wouldn't have said anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm going to be honest, that number was limited. I kind of knew that I surround myself not only in colleagues, clients, and family and friends that are going to accept me fully for me. So I didn't have a lot of people that didn't share anything with at all,
Yeah.
but sometimes,
Yeah.
but that was
Well,
how I did it. Yeah.
yeah, it's so good. I mean, I think, one of the gifts of the 8 is kind of just to the point, like, what's the bottom line, honey? Like,
Yeah.
that's just who, Enneagram 8s are and that actually is a freedom in this case. Like,
Yeah.
I might have to do this because of XYZ. And
Yeah.
it's just like, okay. And like,
Right.
if we don't make it awkward, I think, as you said, the other thing is we try to control how other people feel.
Yeah.
We also try to control how they think about us.
Yeah.
And like, we can't control the narrative in their own mind. And
Yeah.
that is like, we get all kinds of caught up in. I mean, I do it. I catch myself all the time. I'm like, I cannot control the narrative in their head about me.
Right.
And it's really hard. And I think one of the other things when we were chatting earlier about this is that the idea of making it okay for others.
Yeah.
And you had this really great picture of a door. Can you just talk a little bit about that, of like why this also became important to you in sharing, not only because you got to bring your whole self, it made you a better employee, colleague, and partner with your clients, but there was another opportunity.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I did not come up with this quote. I can't remember who I heard it from, but it was this concept of, for every door I open, which in that case, that door for me was normalizing this conversation, was being a professional woman at my firm who had this going on, who was openly growing her family and still growing, still moving up production wise. As I opened the door for those conversations and those moments, leaving the door open behind me,
Mhm.
is the quote that I got from someone else. And it was just the idea of one thing that kept me saying, no share, no share, no share, is thinking about the next person and their comfort level with sharing.
Mhm.
I do think that this relates to being an 8, is,
Yeah.
is, is that level
That
of
underdog.
yeah, yeah, right. I'm loud and in your face to my detriment sometimes, admittedly. But it's also because in the back of my mind, there's going to be those. My husband's a 9, and those 3s, and just other people who are a little bit quieter. So I'm kind of doing it for them. Yeah.
Yeah, showing the way. Oh, it's so beautiful. And I just want to keep talking because our time is coming to an end. But
So brief,
I know.
but
So I know it is so quick, but we can't leave without you telling us the end of your family story.
I was gonna say, and then in the end, after 3 years of struggling, actually having to do 2 retrievals, 3 rounds of IVF, I am 3 months postpartum. We had our daughter, Olivia Margaret, continuing to change my life and help me grow. But yes, it did. It didn't end successfully, and I don't negate that blessing as well.
Yeah. I mean, walking through 3 years of joy and grief and disappointment and excitement and anticipation and all, I mean, there's just a roller coaster of
Yeah.
emotions and things. And you handled it so beautifully,
Thank you.
and just watching from afar and close up in some ways. And so great. And I'm so appreciative of that you took the boldness to say things like that in your own firm, but also to come and say, "Hey, I'm a professional woman on a podcast in a
Yes.
professional space." You wrote a great article on LinkedIn about it, and I think it really does keep that door open. And so I'm
Thank
really
you.
appreciative of that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm just so excited, and I can't wait to meet Liv. We haven't seen each other yet, so
Yes. I can't wait for her to meet you too. But thank you for the platform. It's also friends and contacts like you who are helping me with this passion. So
Yeah. And like as Eric is saying, so many people struggled and felt the need to keep quiet, and let's bring our whole selves. And it doesn't mean, like you said, you kept moving up in production. It doesn't mean that our work suffers, and it actually helps. So thank you for being so willing to share.
Thank you.
I just want to keep talking. Okay, so next week on Joyosity, we're here with Kristin. He is a negotiation expert. He is a hilarious human and just a brilliant man. And we're going to be talking about the stories that we tell ourselves during conflict and negotiation. So be sure to join us next week. Cannot wait to see you here. So bye, everybody.
Bye.
So let me put my coach hat on for just a sec. Don't just leave this here. Take a moment. What did you learn? What's your next tiny action step? Share this episode with someone and tell them. Connect with us to keep this conversation going. As always, I'm Jen Whitmer. Thank you for listening to Joyosity. I don't take for granted that your earballs have a lot of information coming at you. Please take a moment to rate and subscribe. It really helps more people join us in creating positive culture with complex people. So work is a joy, people are whole, and organizations flourish. Can't wait for you to join us next week.